Is Jesus a real historical person, or is he just a myth or a legend? That's what we'll be looking at today on Hold True Apologetics. Hey, Dennis Storm here. Welcome back to Hold True Apologetics, where we seek answers to tough questions. And the question today is Jesus an historical person, or is he just a myth? Robert Price stated this: everything we read about Jesus in the New Testament conforms to the mystic hero. There's nothing left over that indicates that he was a real historical person. Price is stating that Jesus is not a historical person. So now we're dealing with the question, is he really historical, or is he just a myth? Well, we're going to be looking at 5 different types of sources that actually give evidence that Jesus is an historical person and he is not a myth. 5 different types of evidences. The first is Roman sources. Roman sources. There's a Roman historian named Tacitus who lived from about 55 AD to about 120 AD. Tacitus was known as a great Roman historian. Much of what we know from Rome comes from Tacitus' writing. Now, he stated this, and he mentioned Jesus. He stated this. Writing about 114 AD is when this was written. He states, consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero, fastened the guilt, inflicted the most exquisite torture on a class hated for their abomination, called Christians, by the populace Christus, from whom the name had its origin. He suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hand of Pontius Pilate, and the most mischievous superstition, thus checked for a moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of evil, but even in Rome. So what is Tacitus, a great Roman historian who is not a Christian, what is he stating? He's stating that there's this group of Christians who get their name from this real historical person named Christ. And then he gives a little picture of something about this Christ. What does he say about him? This Christ was crucified under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius Caesar. All right, so there's a couple things we see right there. The second source I want to know is a Jewish source named Josephus. Josephus lived from about 36 AD to about 100-ish AD. And he mentions Jesus a couple times, but one specific time I want to read to you guys. He says this: now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonders, a teacher of such men as received the truth of pleasure. He drew many after him, both the Jews and the Gentiles. He was the Christ. When Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those who loved him at first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again after 3 days, as the divine prophets have foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things about him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. So what is Josephus, who is a Jew, a Jewish historian, what is he stating? He's recording that this sect of people called Christians had begun, and they began because they came about because they followed this person named Christ, or Jesus, referring to Jesus. And this Jesus drew many people to himself, both Jews and Gentiles. And this Jesus was crucified, all right? Jesus was crucified, and the followers of this Jesus claimed that he rose again 3 days later. All right, this is all coming from a Jewish source, and this guy is not pro-Christian. Actually, he's pretty anti-Christian. All right, so it's a Jewish source. The third is a Greek source. Greek source, Lucian, all right, I think that's how you say his name. He wrote about the 2nd century AD. He was a critic of Christians, and he states this. He says, the Christians, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who had introduced their novel rites and who was crucified on that account. They worship the sacrificed sage and live after his laws. So what's he saying? He's kind of critical to them and not really in positive. He's not positively reaffirming what they believe. He's stating there's these people called Christians who worship this person that really lived named Jesus, who was crucified and died. He was crucified, and these guys worship and follow what he taught. Again, confirming that Jesus was a historical person. A fourth source is a Syrian source, and this person's name is hard to say. His name is Bar Serapion. I probably totally messed that name up, but he was a Syrian philosopher about 70 AD. He mentions Jesus and Socrates. He wrote about different wise people he thought were wise. And he states this specifically about Jesus. He says, what advantage did the Jews gain from executing their wise king? And when he's saying wise king, it's in direct reference to Jesus. All right. So what is he stating here? He's referring to this Jesus. It was a real person, that this Jesus was killed for what he believed, and the Jews played a role in this Jesus' death. All right, and the fifth source is Christian sources outside the Bible. All right, not inside the Bible. Those are a whole nother topic we'll talk about. But Christian sources outside the Bible. There's tons, but I'm going to briefly mention the church fathers. By church fathers, we mean those that came after the people that wrote the New Testament. People like Clement of Rome, who was lived about 100 AD. They wrote a lot about Jesus, referring to Jesus not as some mythological person made up that they kind of liked the idea of, but that Jesus was a real historical person who was crucified and rose from the dead. Now, what do we conclude from all of these five sources? Roman, Jewish, Greek, Syrian, and even a Christian outside the Bible. What do we see? We see they all confirm that Jesus was a real historical person. Just from Josephus, the Jewish historian, and from Tacitus, a Roman historian, we see that Jesus was a wise man. We see that Jesus had followers of both Jews and Greeks. We see Jesus was condemned and crucified under Pilate while Tiberius was Caesar. We see that his disciples, Jesus' disciples, did not abandon following him. We see that his disciples claimed that he rose from the dead. And we see that this movement called Christianity, or Christians, came about because of Jesus. So we see from these five sources that Jesus is an historical person who was crucified, died, and rose again. Now I want to end with this quote by a professor named Casey Elledge. He states this: the testimonies of the ancient historians offer strong evidence against a purely mythological reading of Jesus. It remains difficult, therefore, if not impossible, to deny the historical evidence of Jesus when the earliest Christians, Jews, and pagan sources mention him. So what's the answer to, is Jesus a myth or historical? Well, we see strictly from these and many more that Jesus was a real historical person. All right, I hope to see you guys next week. You guys have a great week.